The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile just exposed the hidden problem inside Formula One's new era. The cars are not just fast. They may be too fast for Monaco. Before the race even begins, the engine rule has been changed. Electric power now starts fading from 200 km per hour. The override button still exists, but in Monte Carlo, its advantage disappears. Active aerodynamics are banned. And suddenly, the most famous circuit in Formula One has become the first real warning sign of 2026. Mercedes has the most to lose, because the W17's biggest weapons are being restricted. Ferrari has the most to gain, because Monaco now rewards balance, grip, confidence, and one perfect lap between the walls. McLaren and Red Bull see a door opening. And every team is asking the question the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile cannot avoid. If the future of Formula One needs this many limits just to race safely in Monaco, did the sport build cars its own calendar can no longer handle? Because this is not just an engine rule. This is a championship earthquake. And if Mercedes suddenly looks beatable, Monaco may become the moment every rival realizes the dominant car has a weakness. Subscribe to the channel. At first, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile could hide behind the safest word in motorsport: safety. And in Monaco, that word carries weight. Nobody wants to argue against safety in a place where the walls are close enough to punish a mistake before the driver can even correct it. Nobody wants to pretend the tunnel exit is forgiving. Nobody wants to say that the climb toward Casino Square has room for error, because every driver knows it does not. Monaco is beautiful, but it is brutal. It is the race where courage and fear live in the same corner. It is the circuit that turns a tiny misjudgment into a destroyed weekend. So when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile looked at the 2026 cars and saw what they could do in Monte Carlo, the official explanation sounded simple. The cars needed control. But here is where everything becomes dangerous. Because in Formula One, a safety rule is never just a safety rule. It changes the car. It changes the race. It changes who has an advantage. And before Monaco, this engine rule change has done something no rival had been able to do consistently all season. It has pulled Mercedes closer to the pack. That is why the teams are tense. Not because they think Monaco should be unsafe. They know the risk is real. They are tense because the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has exposed a hidden truth about the new era. The 2026 cars may be so powerful, so complex, and so sensitive to circuit layout, that Formula One now has to change their behavior just to make certain races possible. That is not a small detail. That is a warning sign. The first and most important change is the special Monaco engine mapping, known as Rev 1. On paper, it sounds like an engineering note. In reality, it changes the rhythm of the entire lap. Normally, the electric system can keep helping the car at much higher speeds. The MGUK gives the driver that powerful electric push, helping the car accelerate, helping it attack the straights, helping the whole performance package work as designed. But in Monaco, that push starts fading much earlier. The derating begins at 200 km per hour. That number is the center of the story. For normal people, 200 km per hour sounds extreme. For Formula One, it is not the end of speed. It is still part of the acceleration phase. The car is still alive. Still pulling. Still building momentum. Still using the energy that teams have spent years developing and refining. But in Monaco, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has said, not here. Not at this speed. Not with these walls. Not with this margin for error. So the car begins reducing its electric delivery earlier than it normally would. That means the driver feels the power fade sooner. The car does not surge in exactly the same way. The rhythm out of certain sections changes. The approach to the most dangerous parts of the circuit becomes more controlled. The safety logic is obvious. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile does not want cars flying out of the tunnel at speeds that Monaco cannot safely absorb. It does not want the climb toward Casino Square becoming a place where instant electric torque turns confidence into risk. It does not want sudden energy behavior creating unpredictable closing speeds in traffic. But the sporting consequence is just as obvious. Mercedes loses part of what made it frightening. Not all of it, but enough to matter. Because dominance in Formula One is rarely one giant advantage. It is a collection of smaller advantages stacked together until the other teams cannot reach you. A little more power delivery. A little cleaner deployment. A little more efficiency. A little more stability. A little more confidence on corner exit. Take one layer away, and the fastest car can still be fast. But it may no longer feel untouchable. That is exactly what Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull wanted to hear. Mercedes entered the season with the W17 looking like the car everyone else had to measure themselves against. It was not just quick. It was complete. It had the pace to win, the energy performance to stretch gaps, and the consistency to make races feel controlled before rivals could respond. At normal circuits, that advantage looked like a wall. At Monaco, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has created a door. And Ferrari is staring straight through it. Because Monaco does not reward raw power the way other circuits do. Monaco rewards confidence. It rewards a car that rotates cleanly through slow corners. It rewards mechanical grip. It rewards traction. It rewards a driver who can place the car within inches of the barrier without the rear stepping away. So when the engine deployment is restricted earlier, the race shifts even further away from pure power and toward the qualities Ferrari believes it can use. That is why Ferrari suddenly becomes dangerous. Not because the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile handed it a victory. Nothing in Monaco is ever handed to anyone. But because the rule change has reduced the size of the mountain Ferrari has to climb. Before, the question was whether Ferrari could overcome Mercedes' full advantage. Now, the question is whether Ferrari can beat a Mercedes that has been forced into a less powerful version of its usual self. That is a completely different fight. And that is why the word exposed matters. Because what has been exposed is not only the engine map. It is the vulnerability of the new rules. The 2026 cars were designed to be advanced, efficient, and aggressive. They were supposed to represent the future. More electric power. Smarter systems. More active control. A different kind of Formula One machine. But Monaco is forcing that future to slow down. And that creates an uncomfortable image. A sport that built cars for tomorrow, now restricting them so they can survive yesterday's most iconic circuit. That is the tension at the heart of this story. The new cars are not simply too fast everywhere. They are too fast in specific places. And that is even more complicated. Because it means the problem is not just maximum speed. It is the shape of speed. Where the car accelerates. How quickly the power arrives. When the electric delivery fades. Whether the driver behind can predict what the car ahead will do. That is why the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile did not only worry about the tunnel. It also worried about sudden power reduction, the kind of effect that can create a dangerous closing speed if one car slows more sharply than the car behind expects. The word used for that danger is superclipping. It sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Imagine a car ahead suddenly stops pulling as strongly while the car behind is still expecting it to accelerate. The gap closes faster than expected. On a wide circuit, there may be space to react. In Monaco, there may not be. That is why predictable power delivery matters. And that is why Rev 1 is not only about making the cars slower. It is about making them safer to follow, safer to drive, and safer to trust in the tightest parts of the lap. But again, safety does not erase the competitive impact. If one team built a major strength around deployment, and another team built more of its hope around balance and grip, the same safety rule affects them differently. Mercedes feels the cut. Ferrari feels the opportunity. McLaren feels the field compressing. Red Bull feels a chance to enter a race that looked out of reach. This is where the paddock tension grows. Because every team may agree that drivers should be protected, but no team will ignore a change that might decide who can win. And Monaco is exactly the wrong place for a team to lose even a small edge. At a normal circuit, if you are a few tenths faster, you can recover. You can pass. You can use strategy. You can attack down a long straight. You can make the race come back to you. At Monaco, if you qualify behind, you may stay behind. That is why the engine rule change has such huge consequences. It does not just affect race pace. It affects qualifying confidence. One lap at Monaco is everything. The driver has to know how the car will respond in every short burst of throttle. He has to feel the power delivery. He has to trust the rear tires. He has to know the car will not surprise him when he commits to the wall. If the car feels even slightly different, the driver may leave a margin. And at Monaco, leaving a margin is the same as giving away the race. That is why Mercedes is under real pressure. The W17 may still be the best car. But if the driver cannot extract everything in the first decisive laps, if the car no longer has the same punch, if the deployment feels different enough to change confidence, then Ferrari does not need to be better everywhere. It only needs to be better at the right moment. One perfect lap. One clean sector. One Ferrari on the front row. That could change the race. Then comes the second exposed element, and it may be even more symbolic than the engine rule. Active aerodynamics are banned for the entire Monaco weekend. Completely. No active aero in qualifying. No active aero in the race. No straight mode. No opening the system on the main straight. Nothing. The feature that was supposed to define the 2026 generation has been switched off at the most famous race of the season. That is enormous. because active aerodynamics were not sold as a small accessory. They were one of the big ideas of the new cars. The car could reduce drag when speed mattered, then regain downforce when grip mattered. In simple terms, the car could change personality. Fast and slippery on the straights. Stable and planted in the corners. That was the future. But in Monaco, the future is fixed. The wings stay in one configuration. The car runs in high downforce form. The clever straight line mode disappears. Again, the reason is safety. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile did not want moving aerostates to create excessive speed in dangerous zones, especially near the tunnel and other parts of the lap where a mistake could be severe. But the message to the teams is uncomfortable. One of the sport's most important new technologies cannot be trusted at Monaco. That does not mean it is a bad technology. It means the combination of technology and circuit is too sensitive. And that raises a question that every team will carry beyond this weekend. Where else will the future need to be switched off? Singapore? Other street circuits? High-speed tracks with different danger zones? If a team spends its resources building a car around active aero and energy management, but those tools are limited differently depending on the circuit, then the championship becomes more complex, more uncertain, and more political. That is why teams are not simply reacting to Monaco. They are reacting to the precedent. Today, it is Monaco. Tomorrow, it could be another circuit, another map, another restriction, another race where the car is not allowed to be the full version of itself. That makes engineers nervous. It makes drivers cautious. It makes team principals watch the regulations more closely. And it makes rivals wonder whether Mercedes' dominance can be attacked not only through upgrades, but through the kind of tracks where the rules force its strongest tools to shrink. That is why this story feels so explosive before a single lap. Because the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile has not just changed how fast the cars can go. It has changed what teams believe is possible. Ferrari now has belief. Lewis Hamilton had already pointed toward Monaco as a circuit where Ferrari could be competitive because power is not the main factor. With the engine map restricting deployment and active aero removed, that view becomes far more powerful. Charles Leclerc also becomes one of the most important names in the entire weekend. Monaco rewards drivers who can live close to the wall without fear. It rewards drivers who can feel grip before it fully appears. It rewards emotional precision, the kind where the heart rate is high but the hands stay calm. If Ferrari gives Leclerc a car with balance, he can turn this rule package into a weapon. And if Hamilton can use his experience, patience, and race control, Ferrari may have two routes into Mercedes' weekend. That is what makes Mercedes vulnerable. Not slow. Vulnerable. There is a difference. A slow team has no answer. A vulnerable team still has speed, but the conditions around it are no longer perfect. That is where Mercedes stands now. The W17 can still win. It may still be the strongest overall package. It may still have enough grip, balance, and efficiency to handle Monaco better than anyone expects. But it no longer enters with the same aura. And aura matters. When rivals think you are untouchable, they protect points. When rivals think you can be beaten, they attack. That psychological shift can change a weekend. Ferrari will not approach Monaco like damage limitation. McLaren will not assume Mercedes is unreachable. Red Bull will look for chaos, compression, and any chance to steal position. The entire paddock feels the possibility. That is what the engine rule change has done. It has created belief. Then the strategy picture adds the final layer. The special mandatory two-stop rule has been removed. In the previous Monaco experiment, the idea was to force more pit stops and create more action. Monaco is famously difficult for overtaking, so the rule tried to create movement through strategy. But the result did not fully solve the problem. There were more pit lane battles, but not enough real passing on track. So now teams have freedom again. One stop, two stops. Possibly something unusual if conditions allow. That sounds like freedom, but in Monaco, freedom can lock the race even tighter. If nobody is forced into extra stops, and overtaking remains difficult, then track position becomes even more valuable. That means qualifying becomes the battlefield. Saturday becomes almost as important as Sunday. And the team that gets the car into the right window first may control the whole weekend. This is where Mercedes could face the perfect trap. Restricted engine deployment means less ability to recover through power. No active aero means fewer tools to create speed difference. Free strategy means fewer artificial chances to reshuffle the order. Monaco's walls mean almost no room to pass. Put all of that together, and a Ferrari ahead could become a problem Mercedes cannot solve by simply being faster overall.